It's been a bit. How have you been?
Good. Been getting my butt kicked the past couple of days, but in a fantastic way.
Probably not enough, most would say, but
My wife would definitely agree with that.
Well, why don't you start at the beginning and introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. My name is Jesse Sargent. I'm the president of delivery at Overwatch Mission Critical, and I oversee all of our field ops in the U.S. and abroad.
That's right. So how long have I known you?
10, 11 years.
Yeah. So I got you as a misfit toy you were a mechanical contractor out of the Army.
Yeah.
You had a couple of things. So why don't you give them the nickel tour, because you've done a podcast with me before, but
sure,
we're going to use that as the genesis to open up what you're actually doing here and what you meant by your opening statement.
Yeah, I'll do the quick one. So former Army infantry, did that for a couple years. When I got out, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I worked a couple different odd and end jobs with HUD and things like that. And then my wife, actually, her uncle worked at a vocational school that taught, it was called Applied Mechanical Engineering, fancy way of saying, work on HVAC equipment. And so I went and did that. I liked it. I think I can remember Ohio had a polar vortex where it was like -38.
And you're up on the roof?
Oh, man. And I was like, I'm out on this. Like, there ain't no way I'm doing this the rest of my life, right? And, my uncle was working for you at the time, and he linked us up. And so then I, obviously worked for you at Nova. When we all kind of went our separate ways from Nova, I went to CPS, worked there for a couple years. And then while I was at CPS, we connected again when you were at Aligned, and went to Aligned with you, ran design and construction for you. And then we, 4 years ago today, actually, decided we could do this for ourselves. And so left, grabbed AG, and started Overwatch. I think the first time we actually talked about it was at DCAC. Well, not the first time we talked about it, but like when we pulled AG,
we made a decision with him, yeah.
Yeah, and like we were like, all right, we're definitely going to do this.
It was like DCAC 2019. It was that September. I knew that I was leaving. I just knew that I had to go do something different. And you were the genesis and the trigger behind that, right? And I probably won't go so much into that story today, but you had hit me with something between the eyes. Halfway through our tenure at Aligned, we were at this dinner, Silver Fox. Do you remember that dinner?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you dropped some stuff on me, which made me feel like a huge piece of shit, which would have been appropriate, right? And I remember that was a point where I was like, I'm going to start taking a lot more things more serious, right? Because you were living in a completely different world. You were working with me, but we were in orbit with each other, but we were not in sync with each other.
Sure.
And
it was too busy to do that.
And to that end, we got to work for an amazing organization that was emerging.
100%.
I just ran into Shap last week. Had a profound impact on both of us. Would you agree?
100%.
Taught us tons. We moved at a whole nother airspeed there, right? The altitude was high, low drag. We were just building everything we could as fast as we could. How has that not been the theme since you've been in this industry?
I mean, it has been. I think the only thing that's changed is, we were building at speed thinking like, 10, 20 megawatts was crazy. Yeah, like, and it was, but then that was just the deal sizes, and that's what, but I mean, in my opinion, we were crushing it, at that time in those sizes. And now, it's the same, but different, it's, now you're talking about, going out and doing 50, 60, 100 megawatt deployments, and that's the norm now. And, if you look at, what the trend is, it's only going to be larger, right?
Have you ever hate them was like, we're trying to really earmark our ability to deliver at a macro level up to 300 megawatts without a disruption of any kind, right?
Sure.
And doing that in multiple sites. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, there's only a few companies that even have the ability to think at that capacity, right? But I want for the people that are listening to understand that this is a data center podcast, the Data Center Revolution, and it's self-serving sometimes when I have people from my team on it, but this is more of a personal story that I want to share with the listeners about this incredible journey that you started. And I want people to understand that before we get into that journey, which is going to be a great time, because I'll just be able to stop talking and only listen and draw you out, because I think that there's people that know you and people have got to see you grow throughout your career.
Sure.
And I think that there's a lot of people that you have an infectious, positive personality. People love being around you, and you're a leader, right? And not everybody is. I mean, a lot of people are in leadership positions, but maybe they don't lead,
Sure.
right? Regardless of your title, you've always been able to lead. And I think that you have something through that. Everybody has gifts, right? It's how they use those gifts. And somewhere along the line, you know, as I talk about the speed of our market growth, and this is going to parlay back into what you're doing and why we're changing as a business because of these things and how that's impacting you personally.
Yeah.
All right. So, you know, the market, when industries emerge and you have traditional startups arise, you know, a lot of things get put to the back burner for survivability mode and triage, and training is definitely one of them. The development of the talent that you have. I mean, obviously these people are talented or you wouldn't have hired them. The training and the advancement and the continuous effort made into developing them as they evolve professionally is limited to us professional leaders by how personal the limitations are for that person at home, right? So we have things that we were sons and daughters before we were anything, right? And then that allowed us to be boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and wives and moms and dads and brothers and sisters and all those things. But we had to be individual. We had to know us. We had to put ourselves first in the development. And when we get older, we stop investing in our own development. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just you know, society tells us that we should be X, Y, or Z. Society tells us that you should put your family first, your kids first, you know, your work first. And I'm not saying that to some degree that's not accurate. Like, you know, those things have to happen. But, you know, I think the genesis of this and what, you know, you pushing me, other people push me, and what I had to come to realize on my own is that it's like the airplane thing, right? You got to put your own mask on before you can help anybody else put theirs on. And if you truly want to lead your family, lead your teams, you got to be able to lead yourself first.
That's right. And you're learning. I mean, it sounds like Dakota's already leaving his fingerprints on you, right? Because I'm going to get to that point, right? Because that's the exciting stuff that you get. There's nothing more dangerous than a person that's rebuilt themselves. Not that you have failed, but we all arrive at these plateaus. Life is just a game, and we're all in a different level of the game. And sometimes we get stuck on a level, right? Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes, you know, we have to walk away from the game and come back to it and kind of understand how to beat that level. And we need people to help us sometimes. I've had, over the last year, I've had massive influences from people that have contributed in major ways to the development of me. But it was only a year ago that I understood that the problem wasn't all these other people. The problem was me and I mean, how can I expect you guys to develop if I don't develop more as a leader myself, right? So I set out on this journey, and in this journey, I learned a lot of things, right? But one of the things I was able to correlate it back to was the speed of this industry's growth. Our industry, the mission critical or digital infrastructure industry, is growing at a rate faster than any other vertical of industry. And no other industry reinvents itself as aggressively as us, simply because every other industry is dependent upon our ability to scale and grow for them to be able to grow too. Think about it, the technology they put in these data centers that are driven by the usage of us as the consumer is limited by us, the consumer, who's the labor force that could deliver the product, right? Yeah. So what happens is we have this incredible industry it's armed to the teeth. This industry never lacks genius or intelligence. It lacks strong leaders and courage to develop and train, and it lacks the ability to fix people, because our industry is moving at a double-digit CAGR, has been for the last 8 years. You know, power that we're measuring in markets are doubling in size, capacity is doubling in size. So since I've been in this industry and you've been in this industry, there's really never been the downside of a cyclical swing. No. It's just running and gunning. And I have definitely felt that. Have you felt that over the last 8 years since we've been in the foxhole together, at least 8, 9
Oh.
years of just grinding.
Yeah, I mean, people say it all the time, like data centers are, let's call it recession proof, right? Like, and I think that the important thing with that to think about is like, take how we just had, the pandemic and everything like that, right? Like, I didn't see any data center people getting laid off. I didn't see, I know it hit the tech
Massively
industry.
essential.
Yeah, like it hit the tech industry in certain ways, but not
Capacity doubled for us.
exactly. I mean, I think I saw a thing that said, Microsoft's usage the first week of the lockdown spiked 750%.
Correct.
That data's got to have a place to be stored, to be accessed. I mean, so the things that affect the economy in the world for every other industry, so far they've shown to expedite ours.
That 100%. We had a greater uplift in an already windfall trajectory, right?
Correct.
So, and if you look at it, we were building at a greater volume and velocity at the end of COVID than we were before that, and we even had other, global. I mean, a U.S. election cycle has a global impact. COVID-19, the release of the vaccinations and the restrictions that came with that, and all the friction that came with that from society. You had Russia invading Ukraine, escalated tensions between Russia and America and China, and obviously now the Palestinians and the Israelis are having their issues. But there's always something, right? So what we're learning is there's no new norm. There's no norm to go back to. The new norm is we're going to be. Think about the volume that we built at, and now it's just we live in an application-based world. Most of us function through applications. Those applications go into a cloud environment, and those cloud environments go into, these massive cathedrals that we build that are the sky for the cloud. Cyrus One trademark term, right? So I don't want to get in trouble. So my thing is you have this amazing thing that's happening, and we get to have the benefit of that. But what we were suffering from that most other people couldn't understand, if you're not in the data center industry and you haven't been for a bit, everybody's exhausted. Everybody is running at record pace and record speed. Like whatever we're doing, like you go to the Cyrus One Summit, I remember, and they're like, basically take whatever we did with cloud, which had a 10x explosion rate over IoT. So that first huge wave we saw was the adoption of all the cloud providers and all the content that was being aggregated and consumed, and the way that we had to solve for that. And then the next step was, the introduction of AI. And what are they saying about AI versus what cloud is? I
mean, it'll be way more than
10x.
Cloud
Whatever cloud was 10x to IoT, now AI will be 10x plus.
I was going to say, I think it'll probably even be more than 10x.
No one has any idea. Not even the AI itself can tell you, right? So I think that we are walking into this industry is the wild, wild west already. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah.
And every day we're charting new territory as a vertical. There's no other industry that really invents itself as much as us. So let me tie it back together, okay? Yeah. So we have been just grinding, like deployed, it seems like nonstop. Like I remember when we were at Align and we had a banner year and all the stuff we were building. And I remember they're like, cool, can you guys build twice as much next year type of thing? Because that's the aggressive nature of this industry. And I think everybody can understand that. Everybody in the supply chain knows like, man, this has never been a busier time.
Right.
But when you're busy like this, companies design their strategy to fall into one of two models. One, it'll be to develop and train talent, an intentional and deliberate, sometimes in place of training and development of their talent. In lieu of that, they'll sacrifice that for more diversity and inclusion. So they'll be like, listen, we have people, they're not going to make it. We know that the life cycle of these people could sometimes at some companies be measured in quarters, and then in some places up to in the max of 3 years. Yeah. Right. So 3 years is the business model that they have going, hey, if I don't train and develop my talent, I know that they'll burn out and be gone in 3 years.
Yep.
Maybe that's okay. Now I get another healthier person who's ready to move up. They get to move up into that position. They get paid more than what they were getting paid, and we could burn them out. We know we're going to suffer 6 months while they acclimate and ramp up. It takes 3 months just to figure out where the bathroom's at, another 3 months to get along, right? So, 6 months into it, so now I'm going to get 2.5 years of grueling output and productivity out of this person. And if I don't train and develop them, I know that they're gone in the end of that 3rd year.
Yeah.
And we just see that model, right? So companies are just passing people back and forth between companies. And what is happening to us, the employees, the workers we're like, man, I no longer will suffer this massive inconvenience of working here where I'm unfulfilled for the amount of money that they're paying me. But this other company is going to pay me 20% more. And I'm willing to go do the same thing, work just as hard and suffer for 20% more because then the juice is worth the squeeze.
Sure.
But at that same point, they're just learning how to suffer with a better wallet, right? But they're still suffering.
My dad used to have a saying that everyone in life eats a shit sandwich. How much bread you got depends on how much shit you got to taste.
Yeah, and that is fact. Your dad's a genius. So my thing is we have workers that are burned out, and we are coming up on year 4, and we were seeing, first of all, we whipsaw harder as a startup.
Oh,
but when you come into year 4, you're like, hey, we're going to emerge with this. We're going to begin to standardize, right? We're not, the soup will eventually be code locked down. We'll stop throwing everything at the wall to see what works, and we're going to start really figuring out what's worked well. And we're going to just drill in and do more of those things, right? So your vision is really focused on the customer and the products you provide them, right? And then the value you bring them and the unique requirements that they may have. You know, the needs of the market and the value that you bring is the other part.
Yeah.
The customer and the product, the needs and the value. And when we can marry those things, what you realize is what these companies need is they all have a need for labor, but what they really need is a healthier labor force, a healthier workforce. And it's not good for us to just keep churning and burning people out, because businesses are also learning now. Every time that I have to start over with another person, that erodes my margins. It impacts maybe not my top line, but my bottom line. And I need to figure out how to protect that, right? So it's financially accretive. It's prudent as a business to figure out how to maximize your output and your productivity on your COGS. For us, which the primary line of business we use to generate revenue is a labor force, is a human being, someone with a name on it.
Sure.
And we learn like we can't leave people on these programs as islands, and we learned that through attrition.
Oh yeah, I mean,
right? Yeah. But you learn as you grow, and what we learned was, hey, society has developed this construct to where we as employees are used to going in and just getting. So many of us will work uninspired in an environment in which we don't feel safe from in the politics maybe, and we go home every day unfulfilled. And those people are miserable, and their productivity and their output is their productivity and their output is proportionate to their value, meaning like they're not really doing much, right? They're struggling.
Yeah.
But what I learned on my journey was, it turns out the happier I am, I went through a painful separation. I had many broken elements of me. We're broken men leading broken men, as Dakota said at the conference, right? But I realized, like, man, the growth of my business is limited on my growth as a person, because I can't grow professionally unless I can grow personally. Yeah. So I had to, you guys were helping me navigate through, but I picked up a lot of really great people along the way that were just the hammer or the anvil in my life for pockets of time that I needed. And I needed people to help me rewrite the constitution of me as a man. It's hard for me to go back to putting myself first and to thinking myself first as parents. Yeah. I mean, you're never going to hear a mother be like, the first thing is like, my kids come first. I'm like, well, maybe you should come first so you can give your kids 100%. Yeah. You can't give yourself 100%. You can't give them 100%, right? And that whole model is shifting, and society has influenced the ways that we approach certain things. And what we're trying to do is take our hammer and use a platform like this to break that, right? Yeah. But you're the example. So now that I've kind of unpackaged a foundation here that's going to explain like why the hell you and I are sitting here talking, it's because your story is inspiring, and I think your story is going to inspire a lot of people. You inspired me years ago, in that conversation that we had inspired me to grow up and help start a business, which I asked you to be one of the 3 founders with. And now we hit a plateau, right, as a business, where all of us were learning like our limits as a professional are directly correlated to our limits as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one thing when you're in year 1, right? And you got 10 people, let's say, that you got to worry about, and 10 people that you're trying to mentor and groom and help them understand this industry and grow. It's a whole nother when you're approaching mid 70s, 80s, right?
Sure. You got real people, real souls.
Exactly. And I've learned that people are so different, right? It's one of the things that's really cool about just being a human, right? That we're all so different in the things we need, the things we want, the things we desire, right? And there are some people that you can drop them out on a project and they're going to do fine, right?
They like that.
Yeah.
Some like it.
Yeah. I was one of those. Like I wanted to be dropped into the hairiest on fire program possible.
Sure.
Because that's just what I enjoyed.
Harder the better.
Yeah. There's some people that need, the oversight. They need somebody there that they can fall back to. I don't know if I want to call it a comfort level, right? But they just need oversight. They need somebody there that's going to help them grow as a professional, right? I was super lucky. I had all kinds of people like that throughout my career that helped me and helped me grow. I think that, to tie it into what we're here to talk about, like I spent 10 years trying to be what everyone else needed me to be, right? I spent 10 years trying to be a good dad. I spent 10 years trying to be a good husband. And I spent 10 years trying to build my name and my career in this industry.
So you could afford to pay for them and provide
100%. And not only with my family life, but with work, I'd reached a point to where I need to help myself more before I could continue to help others. Right. And a lot of people, listen to things like that and they're like, man, that's super selfish, or that's this or that. Right. If you feel that way, I would challenge anybody listening to, try and put yourself first every once in a while and just start that process, because I haven't even been in this very long. Right. But the conversations I'm having with my wife, the conversations I'm having with you, they're different already after just a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference. You got to work on you.
Well, let's talk about you. All right. So now that people understand why we're coming at it from this angle, it's good to help the human. That's part of our purpose. We're here to help other people. We're put here. You were designed. What's your purpose in life, do you think?
I'm a protector, I think.
And what's the most toxic thing a protector can do?
Probably not be dangerous anymore, right?
I want you to explain that philosophy, but I think a lot of people that are born inherently to be sheepdogs. You're a protector. There's wolves, there's sheep, and there's sheepdogs.
Sure.
And you're a sheepdog. You're a protector. But sometimes protectors, if they have toxic empathy, could easily become people pleasers, and that's how they lose themselves.
Yeah,
when
definitely.
That's
what I've been. I've tried to, and listen, for what it's worth, worked great for me for several years. You know what I mean? And I think that's the lure to it, right? Like it was
functional.
Yeah. That's what gets people to fall into that trap, is like, well, shit, it's kind of working out a little bit, you know what I mean? And it does. Like, you have good things that happen throughout your life in that time. But just like with anything, like with business, like eventually you reach a plateau, right? Or eventually
we
reach
all
a
do.
point.
It's the end of the game level, and we have to level up, and we have to get through that barrier.
Yeah. Or eventually you reach a point, kind of like I did, where you realize, like, dude, one of the greatest things about this industry and about being around everybody and just the things that we've done is there was never a time in 8.5, 9 years that I woke up and was like, God damn it, I got to go to work. You know what I mean? Or I got to do this, or I got to do that. Eventually I reached a point where I could feel myself falling into that, right? Like the trap of,
you weren't fulfilled.
Exactly. Like I didn't feel good in my own skin, just wasn't comfortable,
Then what? You were like, you know what it was? Is you arrived at a level professionally that you wanted to be at, and then you were still unhappy. And you thought that once you arrived there, you'd be happy.
Sure.
We all do that. If I do this, then I'll be happy. If I do that, then I'll be happy. If I have this much money, I'll be happy. And the reality is Sean Anker actually has a book called The Happiness Advantage, I think it's called. And he's done a pretty amazing TED Talk for those that don't have the time to read. But you have to be happy before you can be productive. Like the happier our culture is, the stronger our culture is, the more productive and the higher output our culture has, which pencils well for a business.
Yeah.
Right. So for you, I'm like the canary in the coal mine for our management team. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Like I tend to try to beta test myself on things. Do you see the patterns?
Yeah.
And then if it works, I'm like, guess what we're doing, guys? Guess what book worked? I read 3, one of them I'll pass on, I've stumbled into a couple people. I have mentors, right? I've talked about my mentors on this podcast from, the Crosbys and the Jim Smiths and Peter Gross. But there's mentors are going to do a lot for you, but there's certain things that they're not going to be able to do, right? And they influence you in huge ways, but you need change agents in those lives too. I wouldn't, if you think that those people that haven't changed me or changed my philosophy on things, you're crazy. But those guys in the foxhole with me are the ones that get dirty sometimes. And I'd ran into a mutual friend of ours, and that guy would chew me up and spit me out. And then he has a unique skill to figure out what your excuse is.
Yeah.
He just needs to talk to you for about 60 seconds. Yeah. And then in 60 seconds, with just a few questions, that man has the gift of understanding what your bullshit is, because we're all selling bullshit, right? Like, what is our excuse today? What's the false narrative that we're creating for ourselves today? We need to believe it ourselves.
Yeah.
And he's perfect to help you break that cycle.
Yeah.
Right. And talking with him, I was struggling as a leader on a few things. And one of the things I was struggling with is I hit a plateau with the ability to influence you guys. I could speak on a stage at DCAC in front of however many people, and you may be able to influence them or make them feel good for a little bit, but you won't change anybody there.
Right.
You have to change them by getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. I mean, I know how to do that, but as a player, not as much as a coach. I could coach to a certain level, but I'm not there to help with certain fundamentals. And what I've learned is that there are people that just have that strength, and that's their business, and that's what they do for a living, is they work on the constitution of the human.
Yeah.
And in talking with him and explaining to him, I'm like, I just got to break through to some of my people. I got this one misfit toy that, Jesse, you're a monster of a man, right? I mean, you're a powerful person, you're a powerful leader, you are a subject matter expert on what you do, and you're an authority, Pete. You're trusted. You're one of the best in this game at delivering product faster, more reliable, in a predictable way than almost everybody else. And you lead a team that does that. I don't just say that because you work for me, but you have limitations, right? And
Sure.
One day I figured out I'm not going to be able to crack the code of you. There's too many things. People don't realize how much combat you've been in, or that you've had a traumatic brain injury or a TBI, or guys like you and Anthony and other guys on our team that have been in much more violent scenarios and kinetic situations. Everybody has an element of PTSD from something in their childhood, maybe a car accident, who knows, but you guys have a different level of that stuff. So there's only so much pressure you could put on certain people sometimes, and I didn't understand where the limit was. So enter Dakota Meyer and you here in Austin, right? And, and Dakota had helped me in many ways. He's one of the people that was the hammer and the anvil for me as well. And I think that, were you beginning to see changes in me?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that was what allowed you to feel comfortable trying to take the same journey, because you're on this journey now.
Yeah. And I think that, it's important to say, like you mentioned a second ago, like you've been a good player, and maybe there's certain areas, right, that you feel like you're not a good coach, right? Like, well, this is what I would say. Like, think about it this way: if every good player was the best coach, right, there'd be 100 Michael Jordans,
sure.
Right? There'd be all these different people that would be just stellar at everything they do, because they had these amazing people that have been there, done that, and everything like that. And like, dude, nobody's pushed me harder than you have, right? Like, nobody has challenged me more than you have in a professional and a personal way, right? And I think what it comes down to, like when you talk about PTSD and things like that, not knowing where the limit is, I think one thing a lot of people, need to be careful of with people with PTSD or people with TBI or this or that, or, even just take,
a bad childhood.
Yeah. Or even just take somebody that's seen combat and has been in combat or XYZ, right? We're not made to tap. We're not made to say, hey, that's not the right way to approach me. We're not made to, that's not how we were forged, right? We were forged to go until we collapse, or we were forged to go until we get, unfortunately in the military, side of things, giving up is, that's why we have a high suicide rate and everything like that, because people don't want to tap and people won't raise their hand and say, I need help or I need this or that. So I think like sometimes just as much as there's a stigma around people that have those things, right? I think sometimes people think too much into how they're trying to help somebody or like what they need to do for somebody, when at the end of the day, sometimes all it is like, and you're good at this, right? Like when we have one-on-ones or you do with other people, it's like, fuck work. What's going on in your life?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, what do you
kids, as your wife.
Yeah.
We're always, look, there's resistance at home. There's always something that we're dealing with. We go through cycles, I believe in the rule of threes. 1/3 of our life is amazing and 1/3 is good and 1/3 is shit. And it's hard to remember those, on those bad days, right? But they're real, right? So I always tell you guys, I'm like, when you guys are having bad days, or if you guys aren't performing at the level that I need you at, it's really, like I said, there's two different types of businesses. Those that are turn and burn, those that are going to learn and they're going to see the piece of the cog and it's not working and they're going to put pressure on it to kick it to work better. And if it doesn't, they're just going to rip out and replace it. Yeah. Because that's how, you don't have time when you're moving that fast to make things better. You can't get ahead when you're fucking struggling to get even on the pace that we're growing at.
That's right.
This entire industry is suffering from fatigue. And we have a labor force that is dropping off the bottom end. And I view the labor force in talent perspective. And let me give you an example of the talent. Right down the street is, literally we passed Westlake High School basically on the way here, the home of multiple NFL champions. Sure. Drew Brees, one of them who, as we know, went to San Diego. And I think that there's parts in his life that he was considering whether or not he should be trying to play pro football. And then, fast forward where he went to a different team and he not only won a Super Bowl, but he was the MVP, right? Sure. And it's not that he changed as a constitution of a man. He was just in an environment where maybe people believed in him or helped him develop. Yeah. Right. And I think that we all have teams that we want to go play for because it's a great place to be from, a shitty place to be. Yeah. Right. But I think that there are people that are willingly go into companies, and I've done this too, where, you're just going to go to see, you're going to commoditize yourself and see if you could go, how do I make more money? Because I think if I make more money, I'll be happy. The reality is we should be trying to figure out how do we have the healthiest symbiotic relationship with our business and our work to where we're the most productive we can be. Tends to happen to require us all to be healthy to do that. And as long as we're all sharing in that, like, I'll put in the work to make you healthy. Will you put in the same amount of work? Right. Right. And for us, trying to say these things that we're working on as humans, for us to fix our businesses, we have to fix our people a little bit. And businesses should not become an incubator for society's problems, right? But they should care about their teams, regardless of their size, enough to where they're offering the access to the resources for those that, like, look at how much you've learned in the last few days. And I want to kind of get into that because this is the part where I have been pushing on you for a bit. Yeah. And I don't know what it was. I doubt it was me. It was the circumstances of your own life, maybe at home, wife, kids, whatever. But you said something to me once about dangerous and men that are dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. So what it is, men especially, they die 2 times in their life, right? And what I mean by that is most men die sometime in their mid-30s. We just don't bury them until their late 60s, 70s, 80s. You know what I mean?
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that, you know, as men, especially in our past lives and things that we've done, like most men truly die when they stop being dangerous. And when I say that, I don't mean, you know, going out and fighting. I don't mean, you know,
Partying, drinking.
Yeah, I don't mean any of that. What I mean is, like, at the end of the day, if I'm not leading my family, who's going to? If I'm not the example for my family, who is? If I'm not trying to be the best version of me, then who are my sons going to emulate? You know
What will
what I
your
mean?
daughter
Like,
marry?
yeah.
What kind of man?
Exactly. And so what I mean by that is most of us fall into a routine. Most of us get busy at work. Like I mean, you know, I've got 4 kids. They range from 16 to 5. My youngest might as well be Jack from The Incredibles, right?
Of course, he's
Like,
my favorite.
He's a madman. And you know, you fall into routines with sports and school, and you know, the world has changed a lot even since I was a kid, right? The problems that they deal with are not the problems that I dealt with, right? And you fall into a routine at home, which then you fall into a routine at work. Your life falls into a routine to where, especially as men, I think as men, it's looked at as though we're supposed to be what everyone else needs us to be, right? Men are supposed to be the provider for their family. At work,
Protector.
Yeah, protector. At work, you're supposed to be the person that you need to be for whatever your title is, right? Whatever your position is. And then even throughout life, like there are going to be situations in your life where somebody needs you to be something, right? Eventually you get enough of those added up throughout your life, you kind of stop being what you need to be or what you want to be. And I think when you do that, you're just slowly starting the process of, you know, before they put you in the ground, right? And
You're just surviving.
yeah, you're just surviving. That's a great way to put it. You're just doing what you need
You're tolerating
to
a
do.
mediocre year of your life, and then you're just repeating that 20, 30 times.
And the older you get, and I'm, you know, by no way, shape, or form do I think I'm old, you know, but it's as I have gotten older, man, that 1 year can turn into 10 really fast.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially guys like you that were born with massive amount of talent, were able to rely on that talent for a long time.
100%.
And when you have talent, talent is like motivation. It's fleeting, right? So talent is something that is great until you, but it lulls you into thinking you don't have to work hard. So you tend to not work hard. And when the talent runs out, you don't have the ability to work hard because the motivation that you typically use to work out hard is external. And when that's no longer there, then you have to rely on the internal discipline, which hopefully comes from habits that are forged for you to be able to maintain that level of output. Do you agree?
100%.
So at some point, you and I, who I love you, you know this, we've been boys forever, and I'll do anything to help you be successful, but we have traded paint.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to do in business, right? And you could trade paint and still be friends. We've learned these things, but I don't know of another way of explaining to people how much I love them, and then to help invest into the development of them as a human being and professionally.
Yeah,
you finally, Dakota and I were talking about this reset model for a lot of broken men. There's a lot of broken people out there, right? You're not broken forever. Sometimes you're broken and you got to go heal up on those things. And a lot of people don't. They just kind of throw sand on it and cover it up, and then they go work on something else. Yeah. For us, we're trying to fix those problems. We're not going to be a turn and burn shop. As a company, we decided that we're not going to just let people last or endure or survive for 3 years and move on. We want to offer them an environment where they're inspired by who they're working with or what they're doing. They're safe in that environment from the politics and drama of bullshit of what happens in typical corporate America. Yeah. And they're fulfilled when they go home, and they could go love on their family and enjoy their time home versus going home and dropping dead out of exhaustion because they were just surviving something they hated all day.
Right.
And for you hit your own rock bottom, and you came to me and said, "Hey, man, I wouldn't mind something."
Yeah. I think, and it's tough. I'm sure it's tough for anybody, but it's definitely tough as a man, right? To have other people check you sometimes, right? It's tough to, especially when I think it's important to talk about like societal norms, right? Like, because what I mean by that is like if I was to look at any aspect of my life, right, I would be like, I mean, when you come from the background that I come from, which is, I'm second generation out of a coal mine in Kentucky, you know what I mean? So like, when I look at those things and I look at what society tells me, I've done okay. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely haven't done bad, but so when you have other men trying to help you and get you to a next level, but yet you look around and
you're towering over where you come from.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But obviously you've been trying to help me for a long time. And I think what really, for me, broke the camel's back was my son's obsessed with football, like obsessed. Wakes up every day, like his room is completely autographed Bengals, Ohio State, you know what I mean? Like this boy wants to play football. That's his love. Hey, by the way, shout out to the Valley View 4th grade Super Bowl champions. But you know what? I was going to some of his practices and I was trying to help him, and I couldn't do the things I used to do.
Physically, you mean?
Physically. Like I hurt my hip one day.
I remember one day you broke out your teeth.
Oh God. Yeah. And tripping over bags and this and that. And it's it was honestly like the first time that I realized, like,
you ain't the man you used to be.
Yeah. And I don't want my son to wake up one day and need a different role model.
Well, that's going to happen. These kids like yourself will go through there's 3 cycles we men go through with our fathers. One is, first, obviously, we tend to idolize them. When we hit puberty, we tend to demonize them. And then when we hit a certain level of maturity, we tend to humanize them, and we understand why they're not such assholes anymore, right?
Oh, for sure.
But if they weren't assholes, we tend to lose respect for them. They had to have put in the price.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a parent, and it's easy to be nice and to say yes. It's hard to say no, and hard, for your kid to slam your door, but you need them to slam the door every now and then. But you needed, you were very driven. You were very motivated off that realization that your son idolizes you.
Yeah.
And we all as fathers want that from our children. We also know that we need to be worthy of that. Yeah. And I think that that's what stirred your fire. Would you agree?
I would. And it's he wakes up almost every day. What do I need to do
to get in the NFL?
To get to here or there? And you actually, that was going on. And at the same time, I had shared with you about what, some of the things he says and stuff. And you said something to me one day and you said, well, let me ask you this. Does his dad look and have the output of somebody that their son would play in the NFL? And from a physical standpoint, the answer was definitely no.
But you're a little bit of a freak of nature from what we learned. You had a lot of tests done the last few days.
I did.
And you're a little bit of a unusual character. We're going to go into those test results.
Yeah, that's fine.
We keep going.
Yeah. Long story short, it was an emotional punch in the face, right? And I think us guys, especially, we don't always process those things so well. Right.
But I wasn't attacking.
Not at all. Not at all. No,
conversations.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, like, listen, there's no greater love you can have for somebody than to tell them the things they need to hear, not the things they want to hear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And for me, I had reached a point to where I couldn't help myself anymore. Right. And, I had let it go to a point that I didn't even know where to start. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know anything. And, you got me chatting with Dakota and we started talking about a couple things, and, it was decided I was going to come down here and do a reset.